What's up guys, my name is Marc Steiner, and today we are talking about the Andycine A6 Plus monitor. Let's get right into it. Now before we get into the full video, I do want to disclose that Andycine did reach out and send me this monitor, but they are not paying me for any of my opinions, and honestly, I would not be making a video if I didn't think it was a worthwhile product. And even before they reached out, I had my eye on this product because of all of its amazing features and its price point. At its price point of around $200, between $220 and $200 depending on sales and discount, it changes. This is a really impressive budget monitor, and for what I need as a run and gun person, it works out. I don't need a crazy recorder, I don't need all these insane features that I'm never gonna use. I honestly just wanted something that was gonna be bigger than my camera monitor with some awesome features, and that delivers. So you're getting a 1080 display on this monitor, which is really helpful when you want to do things like this. 1080 is a good resolution for a monitor. If you start getting into 4K and above, the price just goes up astronomically. So the fact that you're getting a 1080p display at this price point is actually really impressive, and it does give you room to zoom in and out of. But by far, this feature I am most excited about on this monitor is, watch this. Boom, boom, boop, bop, bop. False color. I think this is so cool, especially for me, being able to see my exposure right off the bat with a more professional way of checking exposure. Before, when I was just using my Sony cameras, I would just be looking at my histogram as well as the plus minus 0.3, 0.7 on my monitor, which, you know, is good enough. It did the job, but now that I have false color in the palm of my hand, it really makes my life that much easier, and I can really dial in that perfect exposure, especially when working with S-Log3 on the new A7S III. There's so much dynamic range that it's really important to me to be able to see what is actually overexposed and what isn't, and what is exposed properly. So for me, false color, being able to see that is really important. Let's just go ahead and turn that right off, and we can do that by double tapping on the screen, and we can just go bop, bop, and turn that off. Now, although false color is my favorite thing about this monitor, there are still a ton of other features, some of which I haven't even used yet. And to navigate all of those features, the touchscreen and its functionality is actually really simple. I got used to it very quickly. You just double tap center home screen, and then you have all of your options right here, which is awesome. And you can just do the all waves on if you so wish, bop, and then tap off in the center, and everything is there, and you can see how everything is going up, and that's pretty cool. But then, if I want to turn that off, I can just go all waves off, which is really helpful. And then once again, I can see what I'm doing on the monitor, which is really nice to see. If you don't want to dig into the menus every single time, you can actually set up a quick menu system, which is just a swipe up, which I really appreciate. And you can turn these on and off and just see what's in focus, your histogram. And these are really nice, and you can actually customize these by double tapping on them and going to choose which one you actually want. So I want false color on there, I just swipe up, boom, type 1, there we go. False color. And then I can just turn that off with another simple swipe up and off, which I really appreciate. So even though this monitor has buttons and dials and whatnot, I actually have never used a single one of these buttons and dials aside from the power button, obviously, because the touchscreen is just so good and easy to navigate. It makes my life so much easier, and we're so used to our phones and whatnot, it just makes sense. I'm not trying to be using buttons and dials all the time. I do like having a functional touchscreen. So like I was saying, this is a 1080p panel, but you can actually input 4K signals into this up to 4K 30. So if you're doing talking headshots like that, where you're at 24 frames, 25 frames, 30 frames, this monitor is exactly what you need. Now, if you start getting into more high frame rate stuff like 4K 60, 4K 120, 4K 240, depending on what camera you have now, then it's not going to be able to support that signal, which is a bit of a bummer. But at the same time, I feel like when you're using slow motion, I don't tend to use a monitor. And again, I'm a very run and gun type myself, so I don't use my monitor that often out in the field when I'm just shooting content for myself. But on client shoots, when you can show them this on a monitor and not on the camera, or be able to show themselves framed up before you start recording, that's a really helpful thing. So again, for me, I don't need all these amazing crazy features that this has to offer. It's just nice having a separate 5.5 inch display that people can see themselves on, and that's what I've been using it for mostly, is exposure and being able to see myself 6 feet away from my camera, which is really nice. Let's talk about the build quality of this monitor. At this price point, you're not expecting something that's astronomically amazing. It's mostly plastic, which is to be expected, but it does inspire confidence, and it might survive one drop. But it's not going to fall apart while you're using it as you're supposed to be using it. But I also wouldn't be throwing this against the walls and taking this into the Arctic. It has a dual battery system, which I actually really like, and I think will apply to most people out there. It now supports Sony NPF batteries as well as Canon LPE6 batteries. So if you're a Canon shooter, you can just throw a battery from your camera on there. And if you're a Sony person, you probably have Sony NPF batteries if you've been in the industry. And if you haven't, they're fairly inexpensive and you can just throw one on there. I personally have no batteries attached to this right now. And you might be wondering, how can that be? Is that it accepts USB-C as a power source. So I actually have it hooked up via USB-C to a power bank, and that's what's charging it, powering it right now. So I find that really, really convenient, especially when you're out in the world and you just want a run and gun solution and you have a power bank that can power now your gimbal, your camera, and the monitor. That's really, really helpful. It also features an SD card slot, which you can load some 3D cube LUTs onto there and use when you're displaying your footage, which is really, really nice. I have noticed one of the things that annoys me about this monitor is that if I have HLG3 or S-Log3 Gamma Assist on my camera, that doesn't actually translate over to the monitor. It takes that assist away, so you do have to load a LUT onto here. And it does come with some preset LUTs, as you can see here. So if we want to turn that on, what we need to do is go bop, LUT switch, and then just turn that on. And there is the built-in S-Log3 LUT. Because of the new colors that I have with the A7S III, these aren't the most accurate, but when you're just out in the world and you want a rough estimate of how it's going to look exposed correctly, this is a really helpful feature to have. And with the SD card, you can import your own specific LUTs. So you can take in and bring in some manufacturer LUTs from Sony, like I'm going to be doing, or you can create your own LUTs and put them onto there as well, and then you can get a proper exposure with your colors not baked in. That's the important part. Just viewing. They're not baked in. So that's really, really nice. So it's just good to have that kind of feature if you want that flexibility. And then you can show clients in the moment what a more color graded final product might look like. This monitor comes with a nice little hot shoe arm, so you can attach it to the top of your camera. And because you're losing the hot shoe on the top of your camera, they actually give you one right back on the side of the arm, which is really nice to see. And because of that, you can actually just flip this around into selfie mode and then flip it back. And I love that it has the auto flip feature, so you can always have it right side up. It can be a little finicky at times. It's not the smoothest transition, but it is automatic. Now, this monitor isn't perfect, nor should it be for the price point. We already talked about the build quality, but there are some other things that I want to talk about. Going back to my favorite feature, false color, I do wish that there was a little bit more gradation between the different colors. Like gray, which is what you want your skin tones to be, is just so massive that, yes, even though these cameras have great dynamic range and you can always fix it in post, if you're that close in that range, I would like to see a little bit more finite gradation so you can dial in that perfect exposure. But it is what it is on this monitor, but that should be something that you can fix in a firmware update. So I would love to see that from this company. Another thing I want to talk about is the connection. On my A7R III, there were no problems whatsoever. It picked up immediately and was absolutely flawless, and I loved that. But on the video that you've been watching me use, I had it hooked up to my Sony A7S III. And because it's a new camera, I'm chalking up most of these issues because it's a new camera and they didn't necessarily have all the firmware they needed when this camera was announced. So I'm hoping they fix it in an update, but I had some massive connection issues with my Sony A7S III, and I finally did get it to work on a consistent basis, and it seems to be working fine. But on my A7R III, it doesn't show a one-to-one replica of the camera, which is what you've been seeing with the A7S III. It shows a much more pleasing what this looks like without all the menus and stuff there, and it takes up the full screen and seems to be in a slightly higher definition. So that's just something with the A7S III. Maybe in a firmware update they'll have the same functionality as on the R3, but also just make sure that this is compatible with your camera. I'm fairly certain they have a very wide range of camera compatibility, so I think it's just because I have one of the newest cameras on the market and it's maybe not supported by firmware just yet. This being a budget monitor, it does so happen to have a little bit of lag between what the camera is seeing and what you're seeing on the monitor. For me, again, for these kind of shots, that's not a big issue for me. If there's a tiny bit of lag, I'm not doing anything where having everything perfect as the camera is seeing it is critical. So again, that's just something you should be aware of. And the last thing that I wanted to mention in this part of the review is that the monitor does warm up while in use. I've had no issues where it actually detrimented the performance of the monitor. Everything displays fine, everything works fine, but it's just something you should be aware of, that it does in fact heat up. It's not hot to the touch, it's not going to burn you, but it is warm and you should be aware of it. Now, this monitor is packed full of a ton of other features, but like I said, I'm not looking for something that's crazy, and most modern day cameras have a lot, if not most, of the features that this monitor does offer, like focus peaking and zebras. Like, all of that has been accustomed in our cameras for a while, which you can do on the camera itself if you so wish. So for me, those aren't massive, super helpful things because I've been accustomed to that on the camera already. I wouldn't be buying this monitor for those features, but things like false color, being able to load LUTs in, and having a bigger display that I can just zoom in on as well as display to clients and know that I'm in focus and have a better understanding of what my final product is going to look like is just very reassuring, and I appreciate that. So for me personally, it's the bigger display, it's the fact that I can see accurate color, it's the fact that I can see accurate exposure with false color, and it's just all of these things into one for the low price of around $200. I think that's a really, really good deal, and I think that a lot of people out there are very interested at this price point. Because when I started looking into monitors, I was like, all these monitors seem to be $500 to $1,000, and I'm not willing to spend that much money on something that is not going to be used that often. And at this price point, $200, I feel like it's very easy to justify this kind of monitor for your workflow. Alright guys, that's it from me. Let me know in the comment section down below, did you enjoy this video? Are you excited about this monitor? Do you think you're going to be getting it? Or would you save up and splurge for a more expensive monitor or a recorder? My name is Marc Steiner, and I'll see you next time.